Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Sir Hunt on X on this 19th of November of the calendar year 2025. As I come to you live from Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United States of America. Here's hoping everyone had themselves a wonderful day today. Cooler weather over here, bit of drizzle, a bit of rain, more of it coming over the next couple of days, but I managed to survive it. Here's hoping everyone had themselves a wonderful day today. Lots to get to, including a breakout performance for an all-time great that took place in Las Vegas over the weekend. Excuse me, many years ago. I do apologize. I'll touch on that at the end of the show. Let's go get right down to it. It is week 12 of the NFL season coming up. That starts tomorrow. And we start with a bit of a doozy over in Houston. This is the Buffalo Bills and the Houston Texans. Seems like Josh Allen finally broke out of his shell with his Superman cape once again, as he was able to get the Bills over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and show the whole world why he was the MVP of last season, and is now back in the MVP race, going against a Houston Texans squad who was without C.J. Stroud again, and you're going to have Davis Mills on a little bit of a winning streak going here for the both Houston Texans, but I think that ends here because I think Josh Allen got some of the kinks out a little bit, and I think that Superman cape carries over as they travel to Houston for the Thursday nighter. Going to be an interesting challenge going against a Houston defense who has whose front seven is as good as anyone, and the secondary who's pretty solid. It's going to be a close matchup, but do give me Buffalo on the road. I think this one's going to come down to the wire. Comes down to who I trust, Josh Allen or Davis Mills. Give me Josh Allen. Give me the Buffalo Bills. I think this might be one of the better primetime games we have this season. Interesting matchup between the two teams. Now we move forward to the early game slate that's taking place Sunday. Start, of course, with Pittsburgh at Chicago. Question is who's going to be the quarterback. I don't know who's going to be. Don't think that's going to matter much because they're going to put a lot of pressure on the run game. The issue is sometimes the Steelers don't play Jalen Warren enough. This guy should be getting about around 20 to 25 touches a game for the Steelers to win games. And I'm appalled why he doesn't get enough for that team. But it doesn't matter who's playing the quarterback. They're going against a Bears team who's just suddenly finding ways to win under their new head coach, Ben Johnson. And Caleb Williams is as good as anyone right now when it comes to the ability to win, make plays to win games. So give me Chicago at home. I think this one's going to be more of a defensive struggle. I think both teams score in the high teens, low 20s. But do give me Chicago at home. I think they make just enough plays to get the job done. This one I'm taking in a coin flip because I think I think Chicago wins, but the spread here I'm looking at is -3. I'll take Pittsburgh to cover, but Chicago to get the win. And of course, it is the Giants and the Lions over here, over in Detroit. We know how bad Detroit looked on Sunday night, losing to Philadelphia. But I think they get back on track, and they're going to handle the Giants. This one I don't think is going to be close. The Lions offense is going to get going. The defense is going to make terrible for Jackson Dart. Give me the Detroit Lions at home, and I think they cover that 11-point spread. And it is Minnesota at Green Bay. Green Bay looked like the offense started to get going a little bit, albeit it was against the lowly New York Giants. And the Minnesota defense is different from playing the New York Giants. But I think the Packers start to get going here a little bit. The Vikings are getting nothing from the quarterback position, and they haven't looked all that. J.J. McCarthy hasn't looked all that great. I think that trend continues. I think Green Bay starts to get going a little bit better. Do give me the Packers at home. This one I think comes down to going to be a touchdown difference in their favor. The spread is 6.5. I think Minnesota may cover it, but I think it's going to matter. Give me Green Bay on their home field. I think they keep a bit of the momentum going here a little bit. And it is Seattle at Tennessee. Nothing new to say here. Seahawks knew they let one slip in the Rams in LA because Sam Darnold couldn't stop throwing interceptions. But I think that's going to matter. They're going to Tennessee against a Titans team who's just hitting the tank button right now. And I think Seattle handles this one. That game should be over by halftime if they focus. And I think that defense is going to make life terrible for Cam Ward. Not, not a couple other ones here before I go to the big ones. The Jets and the Ravens. This game is going to be a lot closer than people think. Because I said that the other week, Baltimore has to find ways to get themselves going a little bit. I mean, they're winning, but there's still kinks to work out. And the Jets have played the AFC North tough. They beat the two Ohio teams, took Pittsburgh to the wire, and to have the spread here nearly 13.5 in Baltimore's favor. Just cover that, but still Baltimore gets the win at home. They just keep it going. Questions, of course, Lamar Jackson. Is he going to play? He did not practice today, but I don't think that's going to matter. Whoever's a quarterback, they'll still find a way to win. The Jets will make it tougher for Baltimore than people think because Aaron Glenn does have them competing. You do have to give them that, but do give me Baltimore at home. But I think the Jets cover that 13.5-point spread because they play hard, and the jury is still out on Baltimore because even though they're winning games, a lot of kinks that need to be worked out. Now to the big one that's taking place in Kansas City. It is the Colts and the Chiefs. We know what happened to Kansas City in Denver Sunday, and the Colts are coming off a bye. We're going to find out just how good this Colts team really is going against a Kansas City who basically now has to play darn near perfect ball if they want to compete for the AFC West. I said the other day, I think they're going to make the playoffs as a wild card, but they're going to have to start. Let me back up here. The margin for error for Kansas City has narrowed significantly. And they're going to have to play close to perfect ball the rest of the way to get in one of those wild card spots, which I said all along I think they will. But one thing I noticed over the last couple of weeks is Daniel Jones started reverting back to the New York Giant version of Daniel Jones. Still making good plays, but shows the world why he's Daniel Jones. And I think the Chiefs offense is going to focus heavily on Jonathan Taylor and do what they can to slow him down the best they can. And this time, I think Kansas City, knowing they have to have a win just to keep their playoff hopes alive, find a way to eke this one out on their home field. I'm going to quote how many people legitimately think the Colts are just going to march into Kansas City and just run them out of Kansas. That's not going to happen. They have the Chiefs pegged as a 3-point favorite. I think that Colts will cover that. I think it's going to be a 26-24-ish type ball game. But Kansas City finds a way to win at home, knowing they need this game to keep their playoff hopes alive. And which leads me to what's taking place here Sunday. And we know the news that broke that Joe Burrow is a full participant in practice today. I'm not going to make anything of it because it's a part of the process. I mean, just because they say he's a full participant doesn't mean he's going to play. Now, would I be surprised if he plays? No, because he's a competitor. Doesn't matter either way. But it doesn't matter who's a quarterback for Cincinnati. Problem is still, you had the despicable Bengals fan base still supporting Jamar Chase. That's reason number one. Reason number two, as we all know, you can put an offense with 11 statues against the Bengals defense, and they'll run 70 on them. And you're playing against a New England team who's coming off really their mini bye, which means you're going to have a few extra days to prepare for what Cincinnati's going to throw at them. I'm going to take New England at home, but I'm going to give you a bit of a stunner. I think Cincinnati covers the 7.5-point spread. They're going to do all they can to make this competitive either way. But New England still wins, and they're going to handle business in Cincinnati. This is a rematch of what took place week 1 last year, where the roles were flipped. Everybody thought the Bengals were the perennial AFC contender, and the New England Patriots were tanking. And we know what happened with the Patriots. Marched into Cincinnati and won that game week 1. And the story of that one was they just pounded it down the throats of the Bengals defense. And I don't see it being any different this time. Ramondre Stevenson and Travion Henderson are going to have field days on that particular Bengals defense. And the difference, they're not going to be playing Jacoby Brissett. They're going to have Drake May. And Drake May right now is in that MVP conversation. and I expect that to continue. New England will win this game, but I think Cincinnati finds a way to cover that 7.5 point spread because the jury is also still out on New England because we're going to find out how good they can be because they have a back-to-back stretch where they host Buffalo and go to Baltimore afterwards. But New England wins in Cincinnati Sunday. That's the early game slate. I'll touch more on the Burrow situation here in a minute. Now we go to the late game slate, the 4 o'clock slate for us Eastern timers over here. It's the Browns and the Raiders. It's the Tank Bowl. Shedeur Sanders likely is going to start, but that's not going to matter. I think the Raiders are just going to make life terrible for him. The Browns defense is going to do everything they can to keep him in it. Who do you trust more? Who's the lesser of the two evils, Shedeur Sanders or Geno Smith? I mean, can I root for a tie? Because that's probably the only thing I can do at this point. So give me the Raiders at home almost by a virtual default because somebody has to win this. Jacksonville at Arizona. Arizona just finds every single which way possible to self-destruct in ways I never dreamed or imagined any team with that kind of talent does. As I never was sold on the Jacksonville bandwagon, but given how Arizona self-destructs, give me Jacksonville on the road. Give me Jacksonville by default because that's what I think is going to happen. It's going to be a default win because somebody has to win that one. So give me Jacksonville by default. I said along, I still don't trust Trevor Lawrence. I still call them the Jacksonville Jag frauds because that's what they are over there in Duval. So, but they win this week. The Falcons and the Saints, neither team doing anything, but I think Saints win this one at home almost by virtual default. The Michael Penix Jr. done for the year. You're playing Kirk Cousins. That's not going to bode well. Saints are going to just get their 5 minutes of glory with a win. They're still going to get a top 5 overall pick. They're still a terrible team that's in complete rebuild mode. But do give me Tampa. Do give me the Saints at home against the Falcons. And the game of the late slate is what's taking place in Dallas. This is between the Eagles and the Cowboys. Nobody's talking about Dak Prescott season. And if the Cowboys had any kind of defense, and if this team actually had more wins, we'd be talking about Dak Prescott in that MVP conversation because he's had that kind of a season. And just like what Joe Burrow had last year for Cincinnati, it's what Dak Prescott is going through. And you talk about the top 2 receivers, CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens, the games they had the other night in Vegas, going against a Philly team who's just basically scrapped their way to a win over Detroit. But the thing is, their offense is still not great. And that defense is going to get a load from Dak Prescott, who has historically had some big games against NFC East rivals over the last several years. And I expect that momentum to continue. Philly's banged up on the offensive front, especially the standout Lane Johnson. That's not going to help. I'm surprised they had Philly as minus 4.5 on this one. It's a bit wide, but I get it. The Dallas defense just can't stop statues to save their lives. But I'm taking the upset pick on this one. Give me Dallas at home just because I think Dak Prescott is going to rise to the occasion. And as he does historically against the NFC East, I expect that to continue. Remember, in week 1, he found momentum, but it was a little too late. And historically, Dak Prescott has owned NFC East matchups with Dallas. You say a lot of things about him, but in his performances in the division are always pretty darn good. I think Dallas pulls the shocker on this one. I'm a little surprised they had this one as about a minus 4.5 for Philly, given how pedestrian they worked on offense. The other defense is stout. But when we talk about what they're going to face Sunday with Dak Prescott and the 2-headed monster at receiver with CeeDee Lamb at Dak Prescott, it's going to be a challenge. It's a challenge both ways. Very interesting chess match. We talk about the Eagles defense and the Cowboys offense. So that's the 4 o'clock games. Now it's the Sunday night game, and it's a good doozy here. It is Tampa Bay going across country to play the Rams in LA. The Rams, of course, shutting down these Seahawks offense, making life terrible for Sam Darnold. And I know Baker Mayfield plays the best as he possibly could. But I expect the Rams defense to do the same thing to Baker Mayfield as they did to Sam Darnold, make life terrible. And I expect the Rams to handle business at home. This one I think has the makings of a shootout. Both teams I think surpassed the 30-point mark. But give me Matthew Stafford and that Rams defense at home, albeit by a field goal. This one has probably going to be the game of the night, probably the game of the entire NFL slate for Week 12, because this one's a good doozy and a pretty darn good one. And the Monday night game is Carolina at San Francisco. This has the makings of another Rico Dwaddle masterpiece because you're playing a 49ers run defense who hasn't been all that great. And they did get Brock Purdy back the Carolina 49ers did, but that run defense hasn't been all that great. And you're facing Rico Dwaddle, who's been one of the real field goal stories as a running back in the NFL this season. But they're going cross country, and the people are still not buying into the Carolina hype. I think nobody's buying much into either's hype, these two teams' hype, because the wins by both these teams are against some of the bottom feeders, with the exception of the 49ers winning in LA, but that's more because of the Rams' self-destruction. But on this particular game, I think at home, the 49ers get it done. And I think they're going to have to handle the load of Rico Dwaddle, because we know how good he's been. I think the 49ers defense slow him down enough and make life terrible for Bryce Young, who's been better lately, but still the jury is out. Do give me the 49ers at home on a Monday night tilt in San Francisco. That one has to make it to be a pretty darn good one also. So that's the slate for my picks of Week 12. Actually, it's schedule sort of ain't compared to what it was last week because we had some good doozies last week. We talked about Rams, Seahawks, Lions, Eagles, Chiefs, Broncos, Ravens, Browns, which is better than expected. Schedule this week is sort of pedestrian compared to last week, but still some pretty good games to watch and talk about when we talk about moving forward. Now we talk about back to the New England Cincinnati game. We know the story that took place earlier today. That's Joe Burrow going full practice, full participant practice, or whatever the terminology they use. This guy's not going to make an impact either way. The guy hasn't been an impact quarterback since they went to the AFC title game in Kansas City in 2022. Lots of reasons for it. If the guy wants to play, have at it. If he doesn't want to play, have at it. I mean, the Bengals brass and the Bengals fans already did the damage by just wrecking this guy's career by putting him on a pedestal he has no business being on. And the damage is already done. I mean, you wanted this guy paid, you got it. You thought this guy was in this conversation as Mahomes, Allen, and Jackson when he's not. I mean, he's still a solid quarterback, a top 10 quarterback. You could probably argue top 5. It depends where he plays guys like Justin Herbert and Jaden Daniels, among others. You can throw Baker Mayfield and Drake May in there. If you're expecting this guy to be a Superman all of a sudden with a turf toe, you probably don't know what a turf. Let's start with this. You don't know what a turf toe is. You're talking about a guy who's had 3 massive surgeries already in a 6-year career. And if you expect this guy to be just suddenly healthy and just ready to roll out of nowhere, if he comes back, which it's looks like he's going to come back either Sunday or at Baltimore or at Buffalo, one of those 3 weeks. You think this guy's just going to snap of a fingers, make an impact? You're delusional and you're moronic. This guy hasn't been an impact player since they went to the AFC title game in 2022 when they lost to Kansas City. And from that point, he hasn't done anything of significance. He was healthy in the 2024 season, but they finished 9-8 with a 4th-place schedule. And that's something everybody misses. And this guy, if he wants to come back, have at it. But let's not act like him coming back is all of a sudden going to make the team contenders. Because 1, the team is a hot mess. 2, the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media are filled with cowards. And thirdly, this entire season has just been an absolute albatross of a mess. And we know this. And What happens to this guy moving forward? I wish this guy nothing but the best. But I said, this guy's not the impact player the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media have hyped up since losing the AFC title game in 2022. We don't have basically we talk about going 9-8 with a fourth place schedule like he did last season. That's to tell you the lack of impact this guy has. And there's a lot of rebuilding and retooling that needs to be done around him to at least make him respectable again. But we know how everything works around here in Cincinnati. That's all I have to say about that. Okay, if he wants to come back, have at it. If he's good and he feels like he can go, let him play. But where is it going to get him at the end of the day? Nobody knows. We'll find out. And of course, this weekend over at TQL Stadium Sunday, it is the semifinal round between FC Cincinnati and Inter Miami FC. Lots of talking going on. There was no surprise. And of course, we have Lionel Messi coming over here against an FC Cincinnati team who went to the well and found a way to beat the Clownubba's crew and sent them packing last Saturday. You guys over there at TQL Stadium, just like how you did against Columbus, do the same thing because they're going to need it against a real squad who's cooking right now. And I would love to come back here Monday night and celebrate with you guys. It's a one-game elimination, and you have to bring it. And Pat Noonan is going to have to coach the best game he's ever coached for this team to win or have a chance. That's all I got to say about that. I want to come back Monday and celebrate it. I'll be watching it as everybody over there will be at TQL Stadium. Sha la 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 OFCC. But good luck. I mean, I'm not going to make any predictions. I'm terrible with soccer predictions. But you're going to have to be fully focused, fully ready, and have Pat Noonan coach the game of his life for them to have a chance in this. Is it possible? Yes. Because I said in games 1 and 3, when the two games he won against Columbus were two of the better games he's ever coached as an FCC head coach. He's going to go to that next level as a head coach moving forward if he wants to go further. And it starts with this particular game Sunday night against Inter Miami. And you know, they're going to be ready. That one might be the game of the weekend in the MLS playoffs. And it's certainly going to be one worth watching. Pat Noonan, coach the game of your life, because if you do, you just might pull it off. That takes care of all of that. Now to the historical night of boxing. And a superstar was born, and a potential superstar hit his downturn. This took place 38 years ago tonight at the Las Vegas Hilton in Las Vegas. It was on a free HBO World Championship, free HBO weekend on HBO's World Championship Boxing. It was lightweight champion Edwin Rosario against the longtime super featherweight champ making his lightweight debut, Julio Cesar Chavez, and one of the pillars of the Mexican-Puerto Rican rivalry. It was 5 years before this that the last Mexican-Puerto Rican rivalry of this magnitude was Salvador Sanchez obliterating Wilfredo Gomez. And from that point forward, Mexico hadn't had anything quite like Sanchez since the tragedy happened short months after the Wilfredo Gomez fight. Enter this fighter from Culiacan, Mexico, named Julio Cesar Chavez, who reigned supreme as a super featherweight, made 10 successful title defenses of a title, making his lightweight debut against the hard-hitting, premier-punching Edwin El Chapo Rosario out of Tua Baja, Puerto Rico. We're 1 year removed from Edwin Rosario knocking the macho out of Hector Camacho and followed up with a title win over Livingstone Bramble. And one of the true 50-50 fights you could ever have. The betting odds bounce back and forth both ways. Last minute turned out to be a 6-5 favorite in Chavez's favor. Some people could point to what took place 3 years before it when Edwin Rosario, after being up on Jose Luis Ramirez, just got obliterated. And that was still fresh in the minds of everyone in the boxing intelligentsia. For Chavez to have 10 successful title defenses at super featherweight to make his debut at lightweight against this buzzsaw and Edwin Rosario, who just knocked the Macho out of Hector Camacho and just put Livingstone Bramble on all fours, says a lot about this. And this is a Mexican-Puerto Rican rivalry. They didn't have the sizzle that the Sanchez-Gomez one had because Sanchez and Gomez had dueling salsa bands. This one was on a chilly night at the outdoor arena of the Las Vegas Hilton, different circumstances. But in the Mexican-Puerto Rican rivalry, it had a lot of buzz, and there was a lot on both sides that they wanted to see in regards to this particular fight. And little did we know that we were going to see a superstar ascend to greatness at the highest level. Because when you talk about coming out parties, the world was introduced to a fellow we now know as JC Superstar in Julio Cesar Chavez. Because this was a case of skill and determination all wrapped into one, and a massive begrudging and a beating was administered almost in the same way Salvador Sanchez delivered it to Rafael Gomez 5 years before. And Julio Cesar Chavez just took Edwin Rosario to the cleaners. The real story going in was, could he handle Edwin Rosario's punch? Edwin Rosario barely even dented this guy. And we saw what Rosario did to Hector Camacho's face and how he just put Edwin Rosario, put Livingstone Bramble on all fours. And when he realized he could not hurt Julio Cesar Chavez, it was basically a done deal for him. And Chavez just melted, went through his guy like a hot knife through butter, gave him the beatdown so bad to where the cornerman stopped the fight halfway through the 11th round. And Chavez is the new lightweight champion of the world against a hard-hitting, devastating punching Edwin Rosario out of San Juan, Puerto Rico. Maybe for this night, some people always going to point the Meldrick Taylor fight as Julio's finest hour. That's probably the big win of his career. It is. Granted, odd circumstances, we know what those are. But this was probably his finest hour. We're talking about everything he displayed. I mean, the ability, the ring generalship, the skill, the obviously the Mexican will, the machismo, the ability to take Edwin Rosario's hard shot and deliver back. And it's not just the fact he took Edwin Rosario's shot. He took Rosario's shot as if nothing bothered him. That was how one-sided of a beating this was. And it was more one-sided than the odds makers had it. Because when they polled 15 people going into this fight, it was 8 Chavez, 7 Rosario. That should tell you how split this was at a true 50-50 fight. Because there are a lot of questions going into this fight for both fighters. Both answered them. Chavez did it with exclamation points. Edwin Rosario answered it with more questions. But we talk about what happened on this night. Let's start with Edwin Rosario first. This was his end. Because when you get a begludgeon like that, there's no turning back. And we know Julio begludgeoned a lot of people in that ring. But when this guy when Edwin Rosario got the beating he got, his life and career went to the downward spiral. Simply because he started to get, that's where he got hooked on the substance abuse, among many other things. And even though he did win a couple world titles, you can tell that Edwin Rosario, the pizzazz, was gone. Because as the great William Knack, the one-time columnist of Sports Illustrated, will eloquently say, once it's beaten out of you, it's gone forever. That's what happened to Edwin Rosario. A case of a fighter who was probably, maybe he should have been better off as a contender than a champion. Because if you're going to be a champion and you can't do anything to get to that next level, makes you wonder if this guy really was, if you want to call it this, I'll try to say this with all due respect, championship level. Because anybody can win a world title in the sport. Because we know there's all kinds of alphabet soup belts all over the place. But to go from champion to get to the next level to maintain the championship was where Edwin Rosario basically failed. But I said this before with him. Let's flash back a year and a half to that fight against Hector Camacho at Madison Square Garden. Even though Rosario lost the decision, and I thought Camacho was the rightful winner, the fact that he ended Macho time in his eyes would always be the gratification and satisfaction that he always had. And because of that, and because he knew he ended Macho time, that's why everything from that point on, including the loss to Chavez, that's why his career wound up the way it did. Because he was just content with ending Macho time. And because of that content, that's why his career wound up the way it did at the end. One of the more brutal punchers in that lightweight division. One of the few lightweights you can say, I can knock you out with one punch anytime. And boy, did he show it, especially when he put Livingstone Bramble on all fours. And sometimes he might have been able to do this to Julio Cesar Chavez 38 years ago, but he didn't. When you're able to stand up to a puncher and take his punch and able to dish out a punch, it's going to tilt heavily into your favor. And that's what happened with Julio Cesar Chavez. And we know what this sprung off to with him. Arguably a 5.5 to 6 year reign as a top fighter in the world pound for pound. Although we know Ring Magazine had the love for Mike Tyson. I get it. But this guy wore that distinction or shared it with other guys. And we have people in the fight game who nitpick it as if this guy's career was basically nothing for a guy who supposedly pad his record. He's not the only one that did it. But we're not talking about this kind of a conversation without this performance against the premier puncher, because this put him on the map in front of a HBO audience, in front of a basically a split crowd over at the Las Vegas Hilton against one of the premier punchers and one of the premier rivalries. We talk about Mexico versus Puerto Rico, and what he did to him, on what Julio did to Edwin Rosario on this night. The world was treated to a superstar. That's why he got the nickname JC Superstar after this for the next 6 years until the Pernell Whitaker fight. You can nitpick it, you can cherry pick it, you can call him any name you want in the book, but it doesn't deter the fact this guy's an all-time great, and he's rightfully belong in the Hall of Fame. Because we have some people who think he doesn't, and requires a hardcore explanation out of you. That is something I cannot wrap my head around. This guy, if you thought imagine the record that he did was as simple as you guys say it is, go out there and do it. My two eyes want to see it. You guys don't even have the balls to do it. That's what I said the other day when I talked about his win over Jose Luis Ramirez. But a lot of people are going to say the Taylor fight was his finest hour, which, what's the high buzz I had for it. I get it. That was the big win that probably escalated him to a higher stature in boxing history. Granted, odd circumstances. But we talk about what he did on this night, 38 years ago, to the premier puncher Edwin Rosario, just smothered his power, took his punch, and just begrudged him. The world was introduced to a phenom, and this guy became a nationwide hit, not just in his whole country in Mexico, but other parts of the globe, especially in the States, where he sold out Las Vegas and Los Angeles. And he had a couple fights in Atlantic City he sold out. This guy was a goods. This guy's a tough out for anybody in any era, because this guy was a perfect case of give and take and a combination of skill and will, which is something we don't see much in the fight game these days. He was last of a dying breed, born from a different cloth. That's what I have to say about him. Some anoint him the greatest Mexican fighter of all time. I don't have a problem with it. Again, I ask the question again, what is the criteria? Because I could say Salvador Sanchez and Ricardo Lopez have strong cases as much as he does. But again, I'm not going to fight it. It's understandable. It's a very heated argument that has a lot of fighters with a lot of strong cases. Especially we talk about Mexico. Just can't deter the fact he made his mark and he made his history. And you can nitpick it all you want. The problem is the results there. He showed the world just how great he was. And so what he did 38 years ago to Edwin Rosario and one of the pillars of the Mexican-Puerto Rican rivalry, and not just the fact he beat him, he made Edwin Rosario look like he had no business being in the same ring with him. And this is the same Edwin Rosario, as I said, knocked the Macho out of Macho time a year and a half before at Madison Square Garden. And 5 months later, put the favorite, Livingstone Bramble, on all fours with a single right cross in 2 rounds. And some people thought he would do the same thing again. Julio Cesar Chavez had other ideas, and he showed it on this night. I've always said, when we talk about the Latino fighters, especially Mexico and Puerto Rico, and Chavez might be a better example of this than Rosario for obvious reasons, that extra desire to be great. And there's an extra desire that goes down into your gut. When it oozes out and the world sees it, and you show it, it catches the eye easier than you think. Because when you get in that ring, and I can say this, a lot of fighters from any parts of the globe, I get it. But Larry Merchant said it best after this fight. There's an extra passion and a little macho, and when it comes out, when you see it in that ring, you know what the extra passion is all about. And that's why we had what took place 38 years ago when Julio Cesar Chavez just showed the world the extra passion and the extra machismo by just pummeling Edwin Rosario, a mere microcosm of how Salvador Sanchez, like Chavez, had the extra passion, demolished Wilfredo Gomez 5 years before it. And we talk about some of the staples of the Mexican-Puerto Rican rivalry. Maybe some of the more significant wins came from the Puerto Rican might have the overall record. I can't remember what it was, but I read it before I came. Puerto Rico has the overall record. But in some of the more significant fights in the Mexican-Puerto Rican rivalry history, Mexico has a nod because some of the guys there had the extra passion and the extra desire to be great. That's what it comes down to. Not a sign of Puerto Rican fighters. There's a lot of great ones there. Wilfredo Gomez, Wilfred Benitez, Esteban de Jesus, Hector Camacho, Felix Trinidad, Miguel Cotto. Edwin Rosario was knocking on that door himself, even a guy like Carlos Ortiz back in the day. But when it comes time to show the passion, to go to the well, to dig deep, Mexico had the big fight edge over the Puerto Ricans. And maybe the only flip of that would probably be the second Cotto Margarito fight. But we know what happened because of the first fight and what happened to Antonio Margarito after he was caught. That's how the Mexican-Puerto Rican rivalry is. I said all along, you can have it in Mexico, you can have it in Puerto Rico, you can have it in the States, a Mexico-Puerto Rican rivalry. There's always something extra special when you have that kind of a fight. And this event 38 years ago had a bit of an extra special pizzazz, but little did we know that a phenom from Mexico was just going to take over with an exclamation point, and that's what he did. Happy 38-year fight anniversary, Edwin Rosario versus Julio Cesar Chavez. May God rest the soul of Edwin Rosario. But maybe the biggest thing that came for Julio Cesar Chavez was not in the ring, but beating sobriety. And he's been an advocate for helping people get clean. And it's substance abuse, his own substance abuse, just like Edwin Rosario and many others, well chronicled. Actually, it's well chronicled by him. That's where he gets the extra respect. He chronicled it himself. He had anyone document it for him. He owned his own mistakes. He took over. He got clean. He got straight. And now he's living a clean, nice, healthy life. And you have to tip your hat off to him for that. That's why he is El Gran Campeón Mexicano. And for many other reasons also. Hope he's doing well over there at Culiacan, Sinaloa, Mexico. And I touch on, I wrap this up on the Rosario side for one last thing, because this is where the fight community shows their ignorance. Any fighter can win a world championship, as I said before. We have so many freaking fights. I mean, you can put two YouTubers in a ring, and they can fight for a world championship. I mean, you can win any world title, but it says something special if you can find a way to defend it, go to that next level, and now you get that only get to that next level, but maintain it. That was the biggest difference between Edwin Rosario and Julio Cesar Chavez. Edwin Rosario was good enough to win world titles, but couldn't maintain it. Chavez had two long range at 130 and 140. That was the difference. And I said this with Edwin Rosario, and I say this with all due respect because he was a phenomenal puncher. Maybe a case of a fighter because he couldn't do anything at the next level. Maybe best served as maybe winning a world title or two, and that was it. But I've always said the reason why his career wound up the way it did is because of what took place June 13th, 1986, when he ended Macho Time with that left hook that hurt Hector Camacho in round 5. And from that point forward, because he was content by telling the whole world he's not Macho Camacho anymore, he's just Hector Camacho. Because he stayed content with that, that's why Edwin Rosario's career wound up the way it did, as inconsistent as you could possibly be. Because when you have that moment, win or loss, and you're content, you're going to have peaks and valleys. And just like Hector Camacho in that fight with Edwin Rosario did, Edwin Rosario had it just as much as Hector Camacho, and it hit the bottom, you could probably say, 38 years ago when he ran into this buzzsaw from Culiacan, Mexico, named Julio Cesar Chavez. That's all that has to be said. Tip to hat to both fighters. You don't see 50-50 fights anymore today like that, because that was a true 50-50 fight. Betting money went all over the place. It was basically here, even, back, till it hit 6-5. And you had almost little more than half of the boxing experts almost split down the middle. And we don't have that anymore because there's the lack of desire to be great. And when you think about what these two guys had 38 years ago, they had the desire to be great. And that's why they fought the fights. Kudos to both. I just wish we can find some way, someone to have a 50-50 fight once again, because there's no way, with everything that's gone on, the political aspect, the dollar aspect, power play, A side, B side, F side. I don't care what side you look like. Turn your face sideways side. It doesn't matter. You're not going to have 50-50 fights today like you did back then, because people are reluctant to take the risk. And when Julio Cesar Chavez went up to fight the most brutal puncher in the lightweight division at the time at Edwin Rosario, he took a high risk because everybody knows Edwin Rosario, one of the premier punchers, especially when he punched through the guard of Livingstone Bramble and put him on all fours a year earlier. And some thought he would do it again. Chavez said, I want this guy. He was the number one lightweight at the time because Hector Camacho was off doing whatever the frick he was doing. And Pernell Whitaker hadn't come around yet. But Chavez wanted that challenge. It said, bring it on. And after a crazy pre-fight hype where Edwin Rosario used throat slashing gestures, Chavez just laughed at him and said, okay. And basically he said, I'm going to get him in the ring. I'm going to beat him. And he certainly beat him and then some. That's maybe in terms of just isolated performance, that was Julio's finest hour. The Taylor win is going to be the big win. Of course, he had the Camacho win, but Hector Camacho was just a shell at that point, and so too was Chavez by his own admission. And it's going to be in the name of the resume for both guys. But the Rosario performance and how he looked, and it was almost a performance of perfection from his standards. To do it against a brutal puncher who could basically knock you out either hand, and for Chavez to take his punch and just buzz right through him the way he did, you saw greatness on that night. You nitpick his career, nitpick his fights all you want. It doesn't matter. The point is, this guy is an all-time great. and you got to deal with it. Call him anything you want. It doesn't matter. It's over with. Case closed. As I wrap this up, I talk about this thought of fighters being called overrated. I ask this question. I ask this with all due respect. How do you classify a fighter as overrated when you have the career accolades as some of the guys you call overrated? And I'm not going to I'm not going to throw a bunch of names out. I'm not going to turn it into what I do with Bengals fans because there's some people I actually like. And I'm going to do this with respect. What's your criteria for calling guys like that overrated? Are you basing it off of box rec? Because if you are a coward. Box rec isn't the reason for it. If it was easy to do, as you guys say it is, please look up some of the bigger fights and some of the most historical upsets in the history of the sport, and let's see you try to do what some of those guys did. Because if it was as easy as you said, we're not talking about Cassius Clay beating Sonny Liston and that kind of an upset. We're definitely not talking about Buster Douglas beating Mike Tyson. We're also not talking about James J. Braddock beating Max Baer way back when. We're also not talking about the shocker of Sugar Ray Leonard over Marvin Hagler in '87. Because if it was that easy, as you guys say it is, why do we have the upsets we have? And there better be some honest answers because we have some real fools who use the word overrated in some of the most despicable and cowardly ways in the fight game. And if I'm talking to you directly, you bet you I am. I mean, I'm all for respecting opinions, but if you're going to say something, make sure your point is valid. And I'm talking about not the use of I'm excluding the use of screenshots. I'm excluding the use of box rec because that's for cowards. True, honest opinion as to why you think certain guys are overrated, and you better have a good detailed explanation for it, because otherwise you look like a real fool in this community filled with fools. Case closed. I'm gonna have a show about that somewhere down the line, but I'm gonna save it till because there's other fight business coming up this week. I'll probably talk about it like we have coming up this weekend. And on that note, that'll wrap up this edition of Sirhan on X. If you missed this show or any of the shows I have in the past, you're more than welcome to listen to them on the Apple Podcast, the iHeartRadio, and the Spotify apps. As always, make self-care your number one priority in all walks of life. Always take care of you, focus on you, and the good things that come your way. As I said last night, alluded to the Jamar Chase, Jalen Ramsey situation. Always, as part of self-care, respect your boundaries and respect others' boundaries. Because that's the only way you're going to take care of yourself. If you do none of that, nothing else matters. And once you cross that boundary, nothing else matters also. Because once they cross your boundary and you cross theirs, they have to defend themselves, and that needs to be respected. That's why I say take care of yourself first and respect the boundaries. And on that note, have a good rest of the night. No show till after the weekend. Enjoy the 4 days away, tomorrow, Friday, and the weekend. Take care of yourselves. God bless. I will see you Monday. Have a good weekend, everyone.